September 10, 1940. RAF Biggin Hill Aerodrome, Kent. The airfield was wrapped in darkness. Only the distant glow of burning London on the horizon gave the night a pulse of color, orange, red, and the dull grey of smoke against the moon. The air smelled of cordite, oil, and scorched grass. Somewhere near the hangars, a single Spitfire sat crippled, its engine cowling open like a wound. Sergeant Arthur McLeod wiped the grease from his hands and stared at the shattered Merlin engine before him. The aircraft, Spitfire MKI, serial number P9376, had limped home after its pilot, Flight Officer Collins, took flak over Dover. The engine block had cracked from overheating, and oil leaked down its flanks like dark blood. Officially, the plane was grounded until new parts arrived from Rolls-Royce. But Mac knew better. No parts were coming. Not soon enough. The Luftwaffe was hitting airfields across southern England almost every night. Supply convoys were being strafed, depots burned, factories bombed. The entire southeast of England was living from one shipment to the next, and for Biggin Hill, that shipment wasn't coming this week, or maybe even the next. And yet, tomorrow morning, every available Spitfire was expected to fly. Mac glanced toward the runway. Even now, the men were patching the tarmac where a bomb crater had split open the previous evening. The air smelled of burned rubber and aviation fuel. A few meters away, the control tower's glass panes were shattered, and its sandbag wall was pocked with bullet holes. The ground crew worked in silence, each man knowing the cost of delay. He felt the weight of it pressing on him, the responsibility. For every Spitfire that stayed on the ground, there was one less fighter in the sky tomorrow. And for every fighter missing, there'd be one more Heinkel reaching London. He looked again at the cracked Merlin block. The manuals were clear: do not weld. Do not modify. Replace only with approved parts. The wording echoed in his mind like a curse. But Mac wasn't a man who worshipped rules. He worshipped results. He ran his hand along the damaged edge, feeling the rough split in the aluminum casing. "You can't die yet, love," he murmured to the machine. "You've got more fight left in you." A distant siren began to wail, the air raid warning. The men around the airfield froze, then scattered into trenches. Mac didn't move. He pulled the tarp over the Spitfire and ducked into the hangar, where his small team of mechanics, Corporal Rees, young Abelman, and old Tompkins, were gathered over mugs of lukewarm tea. "Jerry's back," Rees said, tightening his coat around him. "Let him come," Mac muttered, grabbing his wrench. "We've got our own battle to fight." He dropped to one knee beside the Spitfire's engine. The hangar lights flickered as the first bombs began to fall somewhere beyond the hill, each explosion sending tremors through the ground. Dust sifted down from the rafters. Abelman peered over his shoulder. "Sir, the block split clean through." "Command says." "Command says we wait for parts that aren't coming," Mac snapped. "If we wait, we lose planes. If we lose planes, we lose the bloody war." Rees crouched beside him. "You're thinking of welding it?" Mac didn't answer. His eyes flicked toward the acetylene torch resting against the wall. Regulations forbade welding engine blocks; it could warp the alloy, compromise the structure. But in that moment, rules felt like a luxury they couldn't afford. He exhaled slowly. "We'll do it tonight. Keep it quiet. No paperwork, no signatures. If anyone asks, she was never grounded." Tompkins gave a low whistle. "If the inspector finds out." Mac looked up, his eyes hard in the dim light. "Then I'll tell him I'd rather be court-martialed than count coffins." Outside, the sky lit up with tracer fire. A Heinkel roared overhead, dropping a string of bombs toward the village beyond the airfield. The shockwave rattled the hangar doors, sending tools clattering from the benches. But Mac didn't flinch. He steadied his torch, lit it, and the blue flame hissed to life, steady, precise, defiant. The others joined in silence, gathering around the wounded Merlin as if around a fallen comrade. Sparks began to dance through the dark, reflecting in their eyes. Every breath was a risk. Every move, a rebellion against orders. By midnight, the airfield was quiet again except for the hiss of cooling metal. The welded seam glowed faintly in the dark, a thin line of defiance holding the heart of a Spitfire together. Mac stood up, back aching, hands blistered. He wiped his face with a rag blackened by soot and oil. Rees broke the silence. "You think she'll hold?" Mac stared at the engine, his expression unreadable. "We'll know when she flies." Outside, the eastern horizon was beginning to pale with the first light of dawn. Somewhere in that quiet morning air, he could already hear the distant hum of enemy bombers returning for another round. And he knew, without needing orders, that his repaired Spitfire would be waiting for them. September 11, 1940. Dawn over Kent. The morning fog rolled in from the fields like a ghostly tide. The air was cold and heavy with the smell of dew and burnt fuel. Across RAF Biggin Hill, exhausted ground crews shuffled between hangars, eyes red from sleepless nights. The attack had been brutal, 2 hangars destroyed, 1 mess hall hit, but the runways still held. Sergeant Arthur McLeod walked through the mist toward the patched-up Spitfire, her skin still scarred from last night's welding. The once shiny Merlin engine bore a jagged line of silvery weld along its block, a repair that officially should not exist. Rees was already there, a clipboard in hand, eyes darting nervously toward the command hut. "Sir, I've done the checks twice. If they see this..." "They won't," Mac said flatly, climbing onto the wing. "We'll run her before anyone's awake enough to notice." Abelman appeared, pushing a trolley with fuel drums and a hand pump. "She's full, sir. 100 octane, just like you said." "Good lad." Mac climbed into the cockpit, settling into the seat like a man taking confession. The smell of leather, oil, and burnt metal filled his lungs. He glanced at the familiar dials, oil pressure, manifold boost, RPM. All silent, all waiting. He pressed the starter. The Merlin coughed once, then fell silent. Rees' shoulders tensed. Mac muttered under his breath, thumbed the primer again, and tried once more. Whump. A puff of smoke belched from the exhausts. Then another cough. Then, suddenly, a sharp, violent roar as the engine came to life, shaking the entire frame. The men stepped back instinctively, hands shielding their faces from the heat and noise. The welded block trembled but held. The Spitfire vibrated with raw energy, her propeller slicing the dawn mist into ribbons. Mac watched the gauges, oil pressure steady, temperature climbing normally. The sound was rough at first, uneven, but as the revs climbed, the engine found its rhythm. A deep, defiant hum filled the airfield, echoing off the damaged hangars like a heartbeat returning to life. Abelman shouted over the roar, "She's holding, sir." Mac gave a small grin. "She's singing, lad. She's bloody singing." But before triumph could settle, a voice cut through the noise. "Sergeant McLeod." Mac froze. From across the field, Flight Lieutenant Dawson, the station engineering officer, was striding toward them, cap on, clipboard in hand, expression already suspicious. Rees swore under his breath. "We're done for." Mac throttled back, cutting the engine. The sudden silence felt deafening. Dawson arrived, his boots crunching on the gravel. "What in God's name is going on here?" That Spitfire was marked unserviceable. Mac replied evenly, wiping his hands. Dawson's eyes flicked to the welded seam, still faintly discolored from heat. "You welded the Merlin?" Mac didn't answer immediately. He looked straight at the officer. "Yes, sir. That's strictly against maintenance regulations." Dawson's tone was sharp, but beneath it, there was something else, fear, maybe. "You could have cracked the block, warped the crankcase, ruined the tolerances. Mac cut him off. And if I hadn't, we'd have one less fighter in the air today. You've seen the reports. We lost 5 yesterday. Every one counts. Dawson hesitated, glancing at the engine again. The machine was still ticking quietly, heat shimmering off the metal. Finally, he said, "You realize, Sergeant, if this goes wrong, it's your name in the report." Mac nodded. "Then I'll sign it myself." There was a long silence. The officer looked at him for several seconds more, then sighed. "Very well. If she passes test flight, she's operational. But God help you if that seam fails midair." Mac gave a half-smile. "If she fails, I'll be the first to know." That's when a voice interrupted them from behind. "Not quite, Mac." It was Flight Officer Collins, the same pilot who'd flown the Spitfire home in flames 2 nights ago. His arm was still bandaged, but his grin was wide. "If she's going up, I'm taking her." Mac blinked. "You sure about that, sir?" "I was thinking. I trust your hands more than I trust mine right now." Collins climbed onto the wing, ignoring the bandage pulling at his sleeve. "Let's see if your miracle holds." Within minutes, the mechanics rolled the plane to the far end of the runway. The sun was just breaking through the haze, lighting the Spitfire's wings with a faint golden sheen. The engine roared again, smoother now, alive. Collins gave a thumbs up from the cockpit. Mac stepped back, heart pounding. The propeller blurred, the brakes released, and the Spitfire surged forward, wheels rattling against the patched tarmac, tail lifting, then suddenly she was airborne, slicing through the morning mist like a silver blade. Every man on the field watched in silence. The repaired Merlin howled across the sky, climbing higher, higher, until it was nothing but a glint against the pale blue. Rees exhaled slowly. "He's actually doing it." Mac kept his eyes skyward. "Not he, lad. She." 10 minutes passed. Then 15. The radio crackled. Collins' voice came through, calm but triumphant. "Biggin Hill, this is Blue 2. Engine temperature steady, oil pressure nominal. She's flying like a dream." Mac closed his eyes for a moment, letting out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Around him, the men began to cheer, fists raised, exhaustion forgotten. The Spitfire banked low over the field, its shadow sweeping over the cheering mechanics. For that brief moment, it wasn't just an airplane, it was defiance made metal. But as the sound faded, Mac knew the war of repairs had only begun. That was one engine. One plane. And the Luftwaffe wasn't slowing down. September 13, 1940. RAF Biggin Hill, 22:40 hours. The airfield was quiet again, too quiet. Most of the pilots were either sleeping in the barracks or still out over the channel, chasing the bombers that refused to stop coming. The hum of distant engines was constant now, like the heartbeat of a giant just beyond the horizon. In a small corner of the hangar, lit only by a single work lamp, Sergeant Arthur McLeod sat surrounded by chaos, engine parts, cracked pistons, bent propeller blades, and half-assembled carburetors. The air smelled thickly of fuel and hot metal. He hadn't slept in almost 2 days. His shirt clung to his back, dark with sweat and oil. The Spitfire he'd welded 2 nights earlier was now fully operational, and rumor of the illegal fix had spread faster than shrapnel. Other squadrons had started calling him the ghost mechanic. "Sir?" Rees appeared in the doorway, rubbing his tired eyes. "We just got word, 2 more Merlins cracked. One at Hornchurch, one here. Command says we're to tag and wait for replacements." Mac barked a tired laugh. "Wait? With half of London burning? Not a chance." He leaned over the bench, tapping the cracked cylinder head with his wrench. The alloy had split clean down the middle, same fault as before. He traced it with a finger, thinking. Rolls-Royce had warned that the high-altitude fuel mixtures were causing extra stress on the early Merlin twos. But the solution, redesigning the entire coolant system, was months away. Rees, grab the acetylene. And the brazing rods. The corporal hesitated. Sir, if Dawson finds out we're doing another one. Then tell him I'm fixing teapots, Mac interrupted. Move. Within minutes, the hangar came alive again, torches hissing, tools clattering, the rhythmic sound of a file smoothing metal edges. Abelman worked the foot pump for the torch while old Tompkins adjusted the flame. The glow painted their faces orange, their shadows jumping across the walls like ghosts. Mac, Tompkins muttered, I've seen you patch engines before, but this is madness. If the alloy warps. It won't, Mac said, steady hands guiding the flame along the fracture. I tested it on scrap. We preheat it, then weld slow. Let it cool gradual. The trick's not in the flame, it's in the patience. Patience. That was something few men had left. Outside, another air raid siren wailed. The ground trembled moments later as distant bombs thundered across the countryside. Bits of dust drifted down from the rafters. Abelman looked up nervously. That sounded close. Focus, Mac said without looking up. Jerry's job is to break things. Ours is to make sure he can't break them fast enough. A few minutes later, Dawson appeared at the hangar door. His cap was off, shirt unbuttoned at the collar. He looked exhausted, but his expression softened when he saw what they were doing. Bloody hell, McLeod, he muttered. At this point, I might as well just sign your court-martial in advance. Mac smirked. You'll have to catch me first. But Dawson didn't stop them. He simply leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching. You know, Command's not going to like this kind of improvisation. We've already had word from Maintenance HQ, they're investigating unauthorized modifications. I'm not modifying, Mac said. I'm keeping them alive. Dawson's gaze softened. And how long can you keep this up? You can't weld every Merlin in southern England. Mac paused, lowering the torch. Then I'll teach every bloody mechanic how. That's when the idea struck him, clear, fierce, unstoppable. He reached for a notepad and began sketching quickly, diagrams of the cracked engine casing, the weld pattern, the preheating points, the stress release scoring. If we send this through unofficial channels, no forms, no stamps, just word of mouth, we can get it to the other bases. Rees leaned over his shoulder. You mean, like a secret manual? Mac grinned, tired but fierce. Exactly. A field fix. Passed hand to hand. Something the brass will never approve, until it saves their skins. For the next 2 nights, the hangar became an underground workshop of innovation. Mechanics from nearby bases began showing up quietly after dusk, men from Kenley, Croydon, even Tangmere, each bringing damaged parts, trading cigarettes for advice. They huddled around the torchlight, sharing tricks, failures, and quick repairs that weren't written in any manual. They called it the night school. There were no ranks inside that hangar, no signatures, no rules, only one mission: keep the Spitfires flying. By the end of the week, more than 20 aircraft that had been declared unserviceable were back in the air. And while nobody dared report how it was done, the results spoke for themselves. On September 15, what would later be known as Battle of Britain Day, those patched-up fighters scrambled alongside the rest. They tore into incoming bomber formations, their Merlin engines screaming like the roar of the island itself. From the ground, Mac watched them rise into the sky, his rule-breaking creations, held together by will, fire, and a few illegal welds. As one Spitfire passed overhead, he could see the faint shimmer of the welded seam on its engine casing glint in the sunlight. A reminder that sometimes, the war wasn't won by those who followed orders, but by those who dared to break them. September 18, 1940. Midday, RAF Biggin Hill. The skies above Kent were unusually clear, no contrails, no black dots of enemy bombers, just the faint hum of distant aircraft returning home. For the first time in weeks, the ground crews could hear the wind again. But peace rarely lasted long at Biggin Hill. A black staff car rolled to a stop outside the hangar, its engine cutting with a low growl. The vehicle bore the insignia of the Air Ministry. The driver stepped out smartly, opening the rear door for a man in an immaculate uniform, dark blue, polished boots, clipboard under one arm. Wing Commander Harold Pierce, Air Ministry Engineering Inspector. The name alone sent a ripple of tension through the mechanics. Men stopped what they were doing. Tools clattered to benches. Even Rees, usually unflappable, straightened his posture like a soldier caught sneaking a smoke. Mac looked up from the engine he was working on. He recognized the type instantly, career bureaucrat. Clean hands. No oil stains. The kind of man who measured risk in paperwork, not blood. Sergeant McLeod, Pierce said, his tone clipped and precise. I understand you've been performing unauthorized maintenance on government property. Mac wiped his hands with a rag, eyes narrowing. If by that you mean keeping our planes in the air, then yes, sir. Guilty as charged. Pierce didn't smile. You violated Air Ministry Regulation 241, subsection C, engine modifications and structural welding without formal authorization constitute a Category B breach. That's a court-martial offense. The hangar went still. Even the distant hum of aircraft seemed to fade. Rees muttered under his breath, "Here we go." Pierce continued, flipping through his clipboard. I've been sent from Whitehall to investigate reports of unapproved field repairs across multiple bases. All of them trace back here, to you. Mac folded his arms, grease-blackened and defiant. And how many of those planes are still flying? Pierce looked up sharply. That's irrelevant. The hell it is, Mac said. You ever looked a pilot in the eye after his plane fails to start while bombers close in? You ever watch a Spitfire grounded because a part didn't come through in time? Pierce's jaw tightened. This isn't about sentiment, Sergeant. This is about safety. About protocol. Mac took a step closer. Safety? Tell that to the lads fighting over the channel in the machines we should have scrapped. Those welded engines? They've brought half our boys home alive. For a moment, neither man spoke. The silence was sharp, electric. Finally, Pierce said quietly, "You're playing a dangerous game. One failure up there, one engine giving out mid-dogfight, and it's not just a plane we lose. It's a man." Mac's voice softened. And doing nothing guarantees we lose both. Pierce's gaze flicked past him toward the hangar floor, rows of patched engines, parts stripped and reassembled, seams that gleamed faintly where the torches had burned. He crouched beside one and ran a gloved finger over a weld line. It was clean. Professional. Done with care. He exhaled slowly. You're not a fool, Sergeant. You know what you've risked. Mac shrugged. I'd rather risk my stripes than watch the Luftwaffe burn another city. Just then, the radio crackled in the corner. Biggin Hill, this is Blue 2. Returning from sortie. Minor damage, but I'm still flying. It was Collins, his voice faint but steady. Mac turned instinctively, listening. Pierce rose, eyes narrowing. That's one of your modified aircraft, isn't it? Mac said nothing. The radio spoke again. Tell Sergeant McLeod his miracle's still holding. Engines purring like a cat, even after taking a few holes over Folkestone. A ripple of quiet laughter went through the men. Rees grinned, shaking his head. You hear that, sir? Purring like a cat. Even Pierce couldn't help but smile faintly. He turned toward the door, clipboard still under his arm. Consider this your warning, Sergeant. If London calls, I'll tell them I found nothing unusual. Mac blinked. Sir? Pierce stopped at the threshold. You didn't hear me the first time. He looked over his shoulder, a hint of warmth in his expression. And if you're going to keep breaking the rules, at least make sure you keep breaking them this well. He stepped into the sunlight, the car door closing with a sharp click. Moments later, the staff car rolled away, leaving only the fading echo of its engine. Rees let out a low whistle. That was close. Mac turned back to his workbench. Too close. But we're not done yet. He picked up the next cracked cylinder, holding it to the light. There's still half a dozen birds down. Let's get them flying before someone smarter comes looking. As the men set to work again, the faint sound of Spitfires climbing filled the afternoon air. Each one a mechanical testament to defiance, courage, and a little well-placed disobedience. September 20, 1940. Over the English Channel. 18,000 feet. The sky was chaos, streams of contrails twisting and breaking like threads across the blue. Tracer fire danced among them, red and white streaks tearing through the air. The steady thrum of Merlin engines filled the heavens, that familiar metallic roar that every man below had come to recognize as the sound of defiance. Flight Officer Collins gritted his teeth as his Spitfire banked hard left, the G-forces pressing him into his seat. Below, the channel glimmered like a mirror cracked by gunfire. A Messerschmitt Bf 109 flashed past his wing, cannon fire missing by inches. Collins yanked the stick back, climbing, feeling the engine surge, alive, responsive, strong. That welded Merlin sang. Blue 2 to control, engaged enemy fighters. Engine running clean, he shouted into the radio, voice ragged with adrenaline. Tell McLeod his witchcraft works. Down below at Biggin Hill, Sergeant Arthur McLeod stood in front of the radio table, headset pressed against one ear. The hangar behind him buzzed with tension, mechanics listening, hands frozen over their work. Say again, Blue 2, the controller asked. Engine steady under full boost, repeat, steady under full boost. Chasing Jerry toward Dover. A grin broke across Mac's face. He turned to Rees and Abelman. You hear that? She's running on a welded block at 18,000 feet. The brass said it couldn't be done. Rees laughed. Then let's not tell them it was. Outside, the sound of other Spitfires taking off filled the airfield. The squadron was airborne again, launching in pairs, one after another, wheels kicking dust as they raced down the runway. The patched aircraft, the unserviceables, were now frontline fighters again, each one carrying the invisible fingerprints of Mac's midnight repairs. Up above, the dogfight grew fiercer. Collins' voice returned through the static. Target in sight, diving. He pushed the nose down, the air screaming past the canopy as the Spitfire dropped toward a German bomber formation, Heinkel He-111s flying low and steady. Flak burst around him, black puffs of smoke peppering the sky. He pressed the trigger. The 8 Browning .303s thundered in unison, stitching a deadly line across the bomber's wing. Flames erupted. The Heinkel rolled, spiraling toward the sea. Direct hit, he shouted. 1 down, 2 left. His engine howled with power, unflinching despite the strain. The needle on the temperature gauge trembled near the red, but didn't cross it. The welded seam held. At Biggin Hill, Mac's hands tightened around the edge of the table. He could almost feel it, the engine, the vibration, the mechanical heartbeat of his work up there in the clouds. Then, static. Blue 2, report, the controller said. No answer. Blue 2, this is Biggin Hill. Do you copy? Still silence. Mac's stomach sank. Every second stretched into eternity. Finally, a burst of noise, Collins' voice, breathless but alive. Sorry, had a Jerry on my tail. Lost him in the sun. Still running smooth, heading home. The room erupted. Laughter, cheers, fists pounding tables. Mac just let out a slow breath, his shoulders finally unclenching. By dusk, the squadron began to return, one after another, the Spitfires limping in, wings scarred, fuselages riddled, but engines running. The mechanics ran out to meet them, guiding each plane into position. Collins climbed down from his cockpit, sweat-soaked and grinning. "You mad Scot," he said, clapping Mac on the shoulder. "She didn't just hold, she sang." Mac smirked, but his eyes glistened with pride. "Told you she'd fly." As night fell, the hangar once again filled with light and noise, torches flaring, tools ringing, the rhythm of work that never stopped. Outside, the searchlights combed the sky for bombers, but inside, the men were already stripping and patching the next round of damaged engines. Rees looked up from his workbench. "Think the brass will ever figure out what we're doing?" Mac shook his head, a half-smile tugging at his lips. "Doesn't matter. By the time they do, the war'll be won." He turned toward the open hangar doors. The sky beyond was alive again, planes climbing into the dark, each one burning a line of light through the night. To most, they were machines of war. To Mac, they were his children. Every one of them carried a story of defiance welded into their bones. And though history would never mention his name in the official records, every Spitfire that roared above the Blitz carried his fingerprints, hidden beneath layers of metal and oil, holding the line between survival and defeat. Epilogue: the mechanic who kept Britain flying. In the months that followed, the night school spread quietly through RAF bases across England. Mechanics passed Mac's techniques in whispered conversations, on scribbled scraps of paper, in the backs of trucks under blackout curtains. When the official inquiry came, it found nothing. No records. No reports. Only results. By the time the Battle of Britain ended, nearly 400 Spitfires had been saved from scrap through field repairs that technically never happened. Arthur Mac McLeod never received a medal. He didn't care. His reward was in the sound that echoed every dawn, the thundering chorus of Spitfires taking to the sky, engines singing the song of survival. The war was won not just by those who fought in the air, but by those who fought to keep them there. And sometimes, the greatest victories come not from following orders, but from breaking them.